Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about big shapes in a painting. One of the problems that I see that I do from time to time, but I see my students doing a lot, is that they get too detailed too soon. And if you get hung up with details too soon, you run the risk of getting a painting overworked or getting it too busy. So what I wanted to talk about really basically is large shapes. And I'm going to use this photograph here that I'm going to use. It's a scene. We're going south for right now, and we're going to talk about something like this, which is a scene, excuse me, of some palm trees on the coast of one of the islands down in the Caribbean. Now, what really is going on here is that there's a tendency here to get hung up in what's happening with the sky, and the clouds in the sky, excuse me, or a lot of the intricacies over here in the palm trees. For instance, let me take this line drawing here and put it in front of you. If you take, I wrote this down so that we can take a look at it, but if you'll notice what's happening is that in order to create the palms, you got a lot of linear work that's going in angles that are about 45 to 60 degrees down from the actual front as it comes down. So, and then you get a lot of detail in here. Now we'd get hung up in all of this detail here. And what I really wanted to do is to break it down into a basic shape. So I'm going to basically say, okay, all of this stuff that's in here is going to be one shape, one shape, one shape. We're going to deal the same way here. We're going to do one shapes. This is a shape. The sky is going to be one big shape. So if we start small, that is to say, we start like this, which is basically, here's a shape. Here are some shapes. Here are some shapes. Dark shape against medium shape and light shape. Light shape, and so forth. We've got a better chance of doing a better painting. And what we're going to do is we're going to work from light to dark. So the last thing we're going to put in there is the dark stuff. But just so that you can break it down from that line drawing, if you break it down into basic shapes, you can see that there's a simplicity to all of this if we just work in large formats. The last thing we'll do is put in all of the little detail. So, what I've done is I've drawn out sort of an area here, which is just basically the shapes that we're going to work with. And what I'm going to do is I'll start, and I'm going to keep this bright. I'm going to try to keep this bright, all right, so to show you what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my photograph, which I'll put up here as a base, excuse me, so I can see what's going on. And we'll do the sky first. So the sky is going to be done. I'm going to actually, because the sky is light, it's the lightest part of all of this, and some of the water down here is light. We're going to start with just taking some water, and let's just put it into the sky area. And I'm going to go, because it's lighter than everything else, I'm going to go right over my palm trees. And we'll just come right down here. We'll do one step at a time. All right, so we'll thoroughly saturate that. And we're going to start to flow in some bright colors, because it's a warm, sunny area. So we'll take a little bit of a mixture of cerulean blue and cobalt blue here in doing this here, a little bit of each, and I'm mixing it up, and here I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to mix it up wet, a little bit of cerulean blue, cobalt blue, mix it up, combination of the both. And it's thoroughly on a wet brush, saturated on a wet brush here. So coming in here, and the brush is wet and the pigment is wet, so it's just going to flow in. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to do this. And we're gonna just flow this right in, and as we come across, there's some sky behind all of this, but basically we're gonna just come in here, and we're gonna work this out. And of course, this sky, as I go across here to my right, I'm gonna lighten this up a little bit more with a little bit of water, and I'm gonna just add just a touch of yellow ochre to this. And so that there's movement in the sky from one color to another. Okay, and we're going to come down here on the horizon, just go right through, and you'll see what's going to happen here. Alright, so all of this stuff is just basically wet into wet with a nice bright sky, a nice colorful sky. And I want this to be a little bit up and down in this area, a little bit watery. What I'm doing is I'm just putting some clear water in here. I want to lighten this up a little bit more. And you can lighten it up with water. Now, one of the things that we have going on in the sky is we've got this cloud bank that's going on up here. And what I probably should have done is taken some of the water and dried it before I actually did this, but we can do it this way too. I'm going to just take a little bit of water, and I'm going to create with my tissue just lighter areas over here that will hopefully will tend to look like banks of clouds at some point in time. But I just want to lighten this up a bit. Just adding some water. Okay. I just need a little bit of a change. So the next stage of this is to change this up, because if you notice down in this area over here, we're going to end up having lighter water. It's our ocean, and we want to leave some white. What we want to do is we want to leave some white on that. So I'm just going to take just pure cerulean blue. Nothing more than just cerulean blue in this one here now, okay? And I'm going to start to do the same thing, but I'm going to come down from the back because it's a little back. Excuse me. What I may do actually here is make it a little bit brighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here from the sky and then go into the water in the background. Right? Now what I'm doing is I'm just adding it to be, I want it to be a little bit darker against the horizon. And then as I come forward, this is way back here, guys. This is just back in this area. All right, here, I'll make it a little darker just so you can see what's going on here. All right, and as I come forward, I'm going to lighten it up. And how am I going to lighten it up? I'm just going to use water. Just water. With my brush. There's just water on my brush. There's some tone in there. You're right. Because I've been using the blue, but I want to get some clear water and actually run this forward, and I'm doing this so that there's water that's going in here to give us a slight tone, but I'm also leaving some white space because we have clouds that are reflecting into the water, but we also have white caps that are coming in. So I'm just making this nice and light. Just a little bit of tone from the cerulean blue. We'll put a little bit of tone here and there from the cerulean blue, which is going to help to create the shadow. Okay, and then we get some shadow. And creating a little bit of shadow means going into my opera and creating A little bit of shadow here and there. But I want that, I'm doing this so that I ultimately know that it's going to come on land. And we have a little bit of shadow coming out from that tree that's going over. So I just mixed a little bit of opera here, look, just a tiny bit of opera in here. I'm still keeping it very light. And coming up on the beach against the, what I'm actually doing right now is I'm bringing it up here in this dry area against this white spot. This is all going to be toned down a bit because it's it's a sandy beach, but I want to bring, just so that I know that my shadows are going to come up on here. We got shadows coming off the bank. So my actual beach color now is going to be a little bit on the warmer side, so I'm going to mix my opera with probably my Naples yellow to try to create a beachy scene here. I also want to do this. I want to come in here and I want to just remove a little bit of this blue. I want to lighten this up a bit, where the top of my palm trunk is coming up into that area. So I'm just taking water. I'm going in here, taking water, and running water in here all the way over. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. Before it's, I don't want it to stain too much. And run water up and over as that dries out. As the paint, what I mean by that is that as the sky dries. Okay, so I've got this general overall feeling of sky. I may want to just do something a little bit lighter, but we're going to deal with that later. I may have to lift some more of this color out. Let me see if I can just here. We'll just put a little bit of water in here and create some. I'm just softening this up. Just water. I'm going to create some watermarks or blooms, blossoms, right up there in the sky area. Let that water penetrate in. Okay. So I'm trying to keep this bright. Want to move it so that it's going to, we're going to start off with, we're doing some light stuff first, and then we're going to get in here and do some dark stuff. So here's the next stage of this, is that I have all of this leafy stuff that's going on all over the place. But the key here is that I need to paint all of this in one shape. And it's going to be a mixture of all the kinds of different greens that we're going to play around with. And I'm not going to put any definition into this until the end at the edges. So that's what I want. That's my plan. My plan is to be able to do that and put this stuff in the edge. So again, I'm going back with my mixture of this stuff and this stuff here, which means by stuff I'm talking about cerulean blue, cobalt blue. I'll probably use a little bit of French ultramarine blue. Some of my, I'm going to bring in a lighter color now, so I'm going to work with my New Gamboge over here and bring it in so that I can create a much more vibrant green. So if we can, let's just go back over here and take a look at some New Gamboge and bring it in here and see what I'm talking about. So if I take New Gamboge and I mix it in here, I'm getting that sort of emerald colored green. New Gamboge lightens it up a little bit. Okay, yellow ochre. See all of these different colors? They're gonna end up playing as part of what I'm gonna put in there right now. All right, see that? So basically what I'm going to do is I'm mixing New Gamboge, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, yellow ochre, and Naples yellow. So all those are going to be like my massive colors in here. For instance, here, let me give you an example. We're going to start off with just putting some stuff in there. And all I'm going to do is I'm not going to do this. This is dry. Well, this is still damp, but let's get this wet down in this area here. Okay, we're going to get this all wet. I'm going to start to do my mixtures of greens. And I'm just letting all of this stuff play together because I can't control it, or I don't want to control it at this stage. This is not the place, this is not the time to control. This is just let it go. Use water. All right, we'll just put it all in here. We'll do some yellow ochres. We want some light water, some green water, some little darker greens to see what this is all still wet. I'm not trying to do anything other than to just get because nothing, get just the feeling of movement of value. Okay, so we end up with something like this on the ground. It's going to be lighter down on the ground. I'm using New Gamboge with this. I'm using Naples yellow. Alright, so this is drier down here into the wet. This is all going to be green. Alright. Naples yellow in the bottom. Alright, so I got to come up in this area too, so we're just mixing up all of these different greens to give me the indication of palm trees. And I'm not, this is not like I'm following all of these things directly. The drawing is a guide. The drawing is a guide. I'm not trying to do anything other than just to fill in this stuff with just general shapes. These are just all big shapes. Okay. And the same thing, that we're going to come right over here now. We're going to do the same thing with all of this stuff that's over here. So we're going to end up, again, what we want to do is create, now instead of wet area, I'm going to take and dry out my brush a little bit more and put in a little bit heavier pigment. And less water in the brush. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up pigment. My pigment is going to be more consistent, like butter. And I'm again mixing New Gamboge with it. Very buttery. And I want this pretty much to stay in these areas. So I'm coming over here and I'm just taking a look at my reference material and my palm leaves and how they sort of look, and we're just going to end up massing those together. And as I come down, I'm going to get a little bit darker or cooler in this area here, so I'm going to come in and get more yellow ochre and maybe pick up a little bit of my French ultramarine blue to put in there. So we're going to come in here and we're going to end up creating a little bit more interesting leaves structure here and there. And notice it's all I'm doing is shapes, leaving some holes, obviously. Leaving some holes, but it's just all depending on, it's all dependent upon how I place this, what I do. And as I come down here, I'm going to find, we're going to turn this into a little bit more of a, as it comes down, a little bit more yellowy, a yellow consistency, and maybe a little wetter, lighter. Some of these areas here, a little bit lighter. Okay. And quite frankly, what happens also, and let's get even a little bit more orangey in terms of some of the colors, what's happening is some of these are dead leaves. Or they're not so much, they're on the way out. They're rusting out or whatever. You notice that sometimes you get leaves that tend to be a little bit redder as they come down. Generally what ends up happening is the underside of this stuff tends to not have as much light on it, and they rot out. So, but that being said, we're coming in here and we're just working with water and pulling some of this color down, and then we'll come back in here and make it a little darker. But always, what I'm shooting for here is the general shapes of palm leaves. So what I've done is I've just created right now a very wet, loose area, and I'm going to let that alone. Let it set for a while, and we're going to mix up my beach. While that's setting up, what I want to do is I want to create my shore over here, and this is going to be, as I said, I'm going to take a little bit of my opera, and I'm going to mix it in with my yellows, my Naples yellow, and then maybe even my cerulean blue, I'm sorry, in my yellow ochre. So let's take a little bit of opera, put it down here. Here's my opera, my wet opera. See, right there. Oh, sorry, I'm not in camera, but there you go. My wet opera. Taking some opera, just mixing it up. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to my new gamboge. I'm sorry, my Naples yellow. Okay, now you see that's sort of a sandy look. The combination of those two is a sandy look. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down, and I'm sweeping, as you can see, from left to right. And keeping this nice and light. I don't want it too dark. And this is not wet. This is a dry area. But I'm wetting it as I go, obviously. We'll put some of this stuff in, make it nice and light. All right, so there's my beach coming in here. So this is, in theory, it's supposed to It's all sort of light and airy. A little bit more of my Naples yellow in here to create okay, that's my bank. And it looks like what's happening is that these tree trunks are being toned a bit with my green, so that's all right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. We're just gonna actually go over some of those. We're gonna make them darker anyway. Some of that's gonna wash in. And we got to let this set up now. We got to let this dry because if it doesn't dry enough, I'm not going to be able to lift out my my lights. And this gets pretty wet here and there. So let's just take some of this and all right, well, so we've got our general, these are general shapes now. This is, you know, we have a big broad shape up here in the sky, in the water down here, my beach or landmass over here, and all my foliage going on back there. So what I've done is I've created a basic shapes for each one of these things, big broad shapes, my underpainting. The idea behind this is to create something of interest, in terms of its overall shape. You know, there's nothing symmetrical here. Everything is asymmetrical. You know, you got big broad shapes that are coming. You got this, all the shape is feeding down. Look how small. You got this movement over here and then it comes up into this area, big area right here. And then, you know, the ideal thing here would be, let's say, to put a couple of people on the beach at some point in time. But for now, we're just going to let this go. We'll just paint the primary here, and then, you know, fill in with the little details here and there. You can always put debris on the beach, things like that. So let's just let this sit for a bit. Okay, so it's now time to do get some definition, I think, in some of these. I'm going to take my small flat brush here, get some clear water, and take a look at maybe pulling out. Now, what I'm really doing is, as the fronds grow, usually the stems of these things are a little bit lighter. So let's make a thin line coming up, a little bit of water, and keep my head out of here, just my brush in here, try to do this. Okay. Create a little bit of light area here. So what I'm really doing is just taking water, clear water, and coming back in and just creating a lifting out. And that lifting out is nothing more than, as I said before, it's simply blossoms that are controlled. It's putting wet water into a damp area. So you want to create the illusion of, oh, sorry, too much water flowing in there. You want to create the illusion of stems or fronds. And they're all sort of coming out from the center, and sometimes you're going to get with water, we'll get some water in here. We're going to get some of this leafy stuff going. Just take water and put it in there. We'll lighten some of this up. And the same thing with some of this over here. Okay. We got a variety of trees, tree trunks that are in here that are going to be a little lighter. Okay, maybe a couple out here. This is still a little bit too wet. It's got to be dry enough so you can lift it. And like a lot of things in the South Seas, you know, you get these, the leeward side of the island, you got wind sweeps this way, not against it, so all of these things are sort of growing out over the water. Lighten it up a bit. We're going to put some dark in there as well. Play around with this. Now in the areas, a lot of these areas, for instance like over here, what I'm going to end up doing is putting some darker stuff in here against the light. And that darker stuff is going to end up being a mixture of, I'm going to start to bring in some burnt sienna into my mixture. And we're going to start to do some bit darker characteristics. So a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of my French ultramarine blue. In certain areas, and we want to get some of this stuff a little bit darker here and there. You know, to create, you know, all that sort of dark stuff that I had. You want to create the feeling that there's a lot of density in this area here. And you want the feeling of palms as well. So there are some interesting things that happen. Just broad areas. We're just going in here and we're saying, okay, let's take this area right here, for instance, and darken some of this all up. And we'll darken some of the stuff up and above the tree. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm just sort of taking, I want the movement to come down, around, and up. Okay, so this is going to be darker over here. We're going to probably, okay, so we're following this line coming down, and come over here, and we're going to end up putting in some trees against the background. Tree trunks there. And probably some nice, just more burnt sienna here. We're using a very the consistency of butter right now. Okay, and the same way with down here. Let's just define this a little bit more. Okay, so we've got some varying darks here, and we need, basically, what we need to do here is we need to, I'm not going to do this with my dark, I'm going to use a smaller brush to do this with, smaller round brush. But what I want to do is I want to come up here let me take this so I don't sort of ruin this, but we got a shadow, and the shadow is what, blue. We have a shadow that's going to be under here. And turning. And we're going to add some brown to that. By adding brown, I'm talking about my burnt sienna. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing here. Let's just add a little bit of that blue. Make it just a little bit darker in certain areas. Maybe a little darker here. Help that along. Same way with this guy down here. Okay. Trees going out over the water. And we got one here, but I'm going to make this thing now these are a little bit different. These are a little bit different. Like some darks here and there. A little bit still too wet there, guys. So let's just go back and put a few more dark areas in here. By dark, I'm talking about a little bit more. My consistency of my paint is more like cream, heavy cream to butter when I'm doing this. No, that's not. I picked up too much water there. But what I want is a consistency more like heavy cream and butter. And we're going to make frond-like, a palm-like. Leaves. And what happens is this. so that you understand what's going on. What happens is that the actual mass here may not look like palm trees, but when you get into the ends, at the edges, this is where you start to develop that look. So it gets to become more of a convincing. You know, you're adding. You got the mass going on in here. You don't want the detail necessarily in there. You want it at the edge. Okay, just so that you can see what's going on. I'll shoot a couple out like this. I suppose you could use a fan brush to do the same thing. You don't want to get too busy. You want just enough to make the statement, and that's about it. That's all you want, is just enough to make the statement. So let's take a look at some of this stuff in here. You want to see, I want to see between the spaces. And I don't want to get too detailed either. That's the other problem is that if we get too detailed, we're going to run into the same risk. It's going to get too busy. So what I'm doing is I'm just making as much of a mass, just a solid statement in here of this is all going to be sort of dark in there. And we'll pull out, when it dries, we'll pull out some lights. Okay, so we got a tree there, tree there, tree there. All right, so let's just stop it for a second and take a look at this and see where we're at. Okay, so it's been a little while for me. I had to run out for a bit, teach a class, and I'm back, and now we want to continue with this piece. So again, just going over it, we've got a nice warm feeling, bright colors. The coolest part of this whole thing is the greens and blues, of course, but the greens as well. And I think right now we want to continue with this. So let's move on. Let's see, what do I want to really do? Okay, I want to start accenting. I want to start accenting a little bit more value between my nice light tree trunk that's coming up here and whatever else is happening. Now remember, what we did here is, what we've got here is we've got basic shapes that we're putting together. This is a shape, and within that shape that we're moving from cool to dark, light to dark, and from warm to cool, and so forth in here as well. We're going to make some of this a little bit more darker. So I have to actually handle it a little differently because the paper is totally dry at this point. So we'll just move on, and we'll just work with glazes and bring this painting around a little bit more. So a little bit of water, and we're going to start to get a little bit more mixture here. I want to get a little bit of water in my brush, and I want to go back in here, and I want to bring out or add water to this leaf that's coming down. Let it saturate and lift out some of this so it's a little bit on the lighter side. I'm not being too successful in doing this, but we're going to give it a try. See, this is what happens when you get it, if it gets too dry. But we'll see if we can rub this out. And if not, we'll work around it. Okay, so we're going to come down here, there you go. Make it a little bit lighter over there. And what we're going to do here to keep this, we'll keep this light by adding, we're going to add some darks to this. And we're going to end up doing some of the same things, right? Let's see, in here is that we're going to bring against these nice darks. That's not a problem. You can bring out some lights with some of these nice dark areas, so we can see that we've got some palm tree trunks that are coming up. Make them lighter. And this one here is lighter here. And we got some palm trees that are going to be lighter in here. And palm trees that are going to be lighted. We'll just make a couple of these. We don't want to get them too thick, too big up there, out there, because that's way off. Those are way off in the distance. So we may have to fill in around those. Okay, and what we also did, and we wanted to do, is to make sure that the back area against the sky, as it comes into the water is going to be a little bit darker way back where. So we just took some cerulean blue. Right, and we're just going to make this area back here just a little bit darker. Okay, so that's off in a distance. And it helps to break up the difference between the sky, which is light down here at the horizon, to something that's a little darker. So we're mixing up a little bit of cerulean blue with a little bit of my opera over here, and get myself a little bit of a purplish that color. And we're going to come in here and touch up a little bit here and there. These are white caps that are rolling in, white rollers that are coming in. And we want them just very, 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 very mild. So let's just start off with a little bit of blue. Okay, and same way in here, we're going to have a few white caps that are going to roll in on the beach. Got one here that's coming in a bit, and maybe let's see, we got something over here. And what I'm actually doing is normally I tell you to hold the pen back, the brush back here, but I need to control this a little bit with this flat brush, so I'm coming down here closer to the area and running in some white caps. And so what I'm doing is just running some shadow underneath the white areas. Okay, so, and then we can come back in here and get a little bit of that blue, get it nice and watery, and go back in, and behind the white caps we'll just give you a little bit of that nice blue of the Caribbean water. Right, so it's sort of off in a distance, coming in here, and it's going to get lighter as we come in here. Actually, what happens in here, this is very interesting, as it rolls in, we're going to get, it should actually come in and actually be a little bit sandier. That is to say, if you're looking through, if you're coming over here where the water's coming in and hitting the shore, we'll make that shore a little bit more sandier, so we're going to just bring some of this in here. Make it more beachy, I guess. Maybe a little bit redder, add some red to it. And we'll come down here and we'll just take this, bring it in here. And we'll just lay some glaze actually on the top of this right now. And actually now here, use a bigger brush with this whole thing, because the brush is actually a little bit too small. And what I want to do is to make this a little bit warmer and brighter. a little bit warmer and brighter in here, because we're going to put some cool, I'm going to put some cool blues on top of that as well. So there's my sort of warm beach going out, warm sand. And then we're going to add on, we'll add some shadows in here to make that a little bit more interesting. Okay, so again, it's a matter of controlling the brush. Let's come in here and pick up a little bit more of my burnt sienna, and I'm going to mix that a little bit with my cerulean blue and get this brownish looking piece. And this is shadow. So there we go. So let's do this. So I just want to keep my hand off of this and start to put a little bit more shadow on the underside of this that goes out. I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to do the same thing with this here. The underside of that. We're going to make actually this a little bit darker too. And we'll be putting some shadow in that area. Nice shadow down here. And we're going to darken that shadow in over here as it comes around. We want that. And then we're going to put in a little bit of the softer. I'm going to feather this out with a little bit of water and a little bit of a touch of my burnt sienna. And we'll start to make this, put some definition into that. Now, in order to really make this stand out, I do need to build some darks, a little bit, some areas that are darker in back in and around this area. So what I'm going to do again is go back in here. We're going to flow some water on the top side of this. So we'll take some clear water. We're going to flow some clear water in here and let it sort of wick up, and put some little heavier areas of dark blues and greens. Let's get some. We'll make this a little bit stronger. Make that a little bit stronger in those areas. And some areas over here as well, to help bring that out. And we've got landmass. And make some of these a little bit darker. Nice and thin as it comes up this way. All right, So you want some of this interesting stuff to be real strong foliage, but you want it to be Caribbean foliage. You know? So some real darks is going to be in here. And the same thing with this here. We're going to end up making some of these a little darker. Oh, okay. And we'll just soften that up a bit. With a little bit of water. Okay? So, all right. So that we've got some reasonably good darks and lights. We've got enough going on so we see these a little bit better. And we're going to start to put in some of our leafy structure here. So up in this area here, we're going to make that a little darker. And we're going to start to, again, big shapes. All right, and we're going to do this. Okay, so we have something that's going to start. Now we're just adding, this is not, we're not defining anything, we're just still doing big shapes. And under here as well, we have a leaf. And we're going to end up coming down okay, and we're going to come in here with a little bit more orange. We're going to bring in some of this more orangey color, a little yellow ochre, a little bit of my burnt sienna together, maybe a touch of red. My opera, adding a little bit more red here. Maybe we'll add a little bit more red in this area here. And my green down here. Right? So what we're doing is we're starting to make our leafy shape a little bit more interesting, but not to the point where I'm still not doing anything to define the individual fronds, the actual leafy stuff that's coming down here. What I'm still doing is I'm still working with big shapes. Okay, so we're trying to just using a little bit of, you know, a little bit of my burnt sienna and a little bit of my red, and actually even New Gamboge, which I'm just introducing a bunch of mixed colors actually over here. Okay, now this is what a palm leaf looks like. You know, they have these slanted kind of things that come down, and again we're looking at sort of large shapes to make this all happen. Now this is all pretty consistent in terms of its value and color, and so changing it up is going to be important. So what I'm really trying to do is to create some of this warmer stuff in here to help that along. So we're going to do some real darks and some real lights. Let's just bring in, yeah, some of that color. What are we doing, guys? So these will be going up this way. So I'm taking just my Naples yellow here, just adding some of the Naples yellow into here and see if it'll take. I'm not sure it'll take. Right. So we need to get some starker stuff in here. We need a little bit more. I mean, we got the general feel for it, but we just definitely want a little bit more darker material. Okay. Pretty much enough of that right now. For now, we'll just let it set for a bit. So let's go back and put in let's get more of our wave action in here. Shadows are going to go along in here. Okay, so we have a shadow that's going to come down from the tree area here. And blue is my shadow color. Add just a bit of my, opera to it to get a little bit more purple. There's multiple variations of this stuff that I've got on my palette. That's all I'm doing is just trying to darken up some certain areas. We're going to darken some of this area over here a little bit more. This is really, we just make this nice and dark over here. And okay, so we'll create something like that. And I need to get, again, the shadows that are going to go down here. And we're going to just put some major shadows all over the place here. So let's do that. Let's get this wonderful blue, a little bit of blue-purple. And this is, let's say this could be all in shadow right here. You don't know, there's a lot of palm sort of fronds over here that are casting sort of interesting shadowed you want to create the illusion. There's a lot of shadows in the area. Alright. Just gives me the illusion of all that beautiful stuff that's there. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. A few of these are purplish. And some shadows that are out here in the water. Okay, so we got those, and we need to create a feeling of water, a feeling of waves coming in. Stuff's on the beach and shadows that are casting over here, and we're going to cast some shadows in this area here, some in there. Okay, pretty much where I want to be with that. And how about that big those big shapes with some of these a little bit more in shadow here, here, and I'm just actually coming in and taking this blue and do something with this here, and we're going to end up doing something with this. Again, these are big strokes. We're still not doing this small stroke stuff. And I'm just using a variety of blues. All right. All right. Okay. So, you see where we're going with this? Hopefully we see where we're going with this. Now we're going to we're going to do the final touch to the final details. To bring this about. And that's going to be a little bit of my dark yellow ochre. Alrighty. So we're going to come out
Alrighty. What I'm doing is I'm just, in order to create the illusion that I want to create, some of these fronds obviously stick out. Major stick out here. Right, so we're just loosening this up and causing all of this stuff here to hopefully we'll work this to our advantage. All right. Well, there's not much of a, unfortunately, there's not much of a value change in that I wanted. I wanted more of a value change, but maybe we can do something with that by lifting some of that out. As we go forward. And we might want to put in, let's see. Oh, my head's in the way. Sure, sorry about that. Couple of people back there. Maybe a couple of nice bright strokes here and there. Okay, maybe one over here. Right. I'm just adding some stuff to make it, hopefully bring it out a little bit more. How about some lavender? Let me go back over here a little bit more. little drops here and there, little light stuff here and there might would just look like a little bright spot. A couple of them here, a couple of them here, maybe a couple of them this here. We got okay, and we got to let that dry up here because that's. I'm going to do the same thing up here because I'm going to put in, like, say, we'll put a couple of strokes here. Okay, stuff like that. But that's going to dry up a bit more. Maybe a dot here and there. Okay, so how do I really create this interesting, this is all shadow in here. It's shadow. This is all soft. Water. Some of the waves coming up on the beach. Okay, a little bit of this. Some of the waves here coming up on the beach. Okay. A little bit of sand is churning in this, so we got a little bit of this and a little bit of this. So we make it a little bit darker. Yep. Some of that, and maybe some nice bright little stronger areas. This nice beach. Okay, cool. Alright, good. Now all I have to do is scrape out, if it's still wet enough, if I can get it to scrape out. Like I said, if it's still wet enough. Where's my knife? See if I can. Oops, that was a little bit too wet. Not going to work. Okay, so we'll let it dry. So I think it's a little bit too busy. I'm just getting a little bit of water here. This is all a little bit too busy. I just don't want as much activity in this area here. So I'm going to just come in here and just soften that. So that it's not as busy, it's softer. And as much as I wanted some detail in here, I don't want it to be busy. So little water. And we'll let that alone, let that work, and we'll just do the stuff at the end. It needs to be less busy. See, sometimes we get too busy. There you go. Okay, that's better. It will be better. All my dark stuff have gone. All this nice dark stuff that was over here, we found it's no longer there. So let's put it back in. We got this sort of root stuff coming out of here too. And we have it's sort of like, let's just put a nice heavy shadow underneath here and here. I tend to do like a lot of people do. We get, I look at my subject matter and then I start to get a little bit too interested in a lot of this detail, and this detail doesn't really have to be here. It doesn't have to be there at all. You don't want it everywhere. Okay, sorry. Getting that head in the way again. All right. Coconut. Let it dry. Let it dry, Tony. All right, we'll let it dry. Taking my fan brush, just going to try and do a little bit of this stuff here. Okay, not much, but just a little bit. And we're going to flow in. Let's get it real thin here. Let's get my thin brush. Oh, sorry. All right, one. Remember, the ends are what we want to deal with here. The ends, that's what's going to tell us what's what. All right. Okay, how about just a couple of real darks. A couple of real darks. We've got some. Okay, a couple of real darks. All right. Maybe not there. Maybe here. Problem is, you know what? I ran into the same problem that I run into sometimes when I did this. I didn't leave enough background for the sky. Seeing through some of these things to the sky. All right. And we'll do All right. Some dark there. And some dark down here. Okay. All right, that's about it. I think we'll call it a painting. And let it go at that, because I can play around with this thing forever and probably overworking this at this point. So that's it. Thanks for being with me. Talk to you next time. I'm your host, Tony Visco.